Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm kind of just gonna do like a sit down story time type of video. I want to talk about my birth story. So, I have a 5-month-old baby. He just turned 5 months like less than a week ago, and he was born March 6th of 2019. He's currently over there taking a nap, so I might have to stop this and come back if he wakes up. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to talk about my birth story because everybody's birth story is different. And so I guess I could start with the fact that I was put on bed rest when I was about 35 weeks because of high blood pressure. I was at work one day and I noticed that my ankles and my feet were super swollen, like the most swollen they have ever been. I didn't really get too swollen during my pregnancy until the very end, and I started talking to some people about it, and they said that I should go get checked out just in case, because it could be a sign of like preeclampsia or like, high blood pressure. So I went to the ER and I got it checked out, and my blood pressure was high and it wasn't going down unless I was literally just like laying down. So I got put on bed rest. And it was a really challenging time because the place that we were living at, it's kind of a long story, but our sewage was like we lived in a duplex. Our sewage was backed up. The road in front of where we lived was being like, there was construction, it was being completely redone, and they had messed up one of the pipelines or something, and everything was backed up. We couldn't do laundry, we couldn't take a shower, couldn't do dishes, couldn't flush the toilet, couldn't do anything. And our landlord really wasn't doing anything about it. He just wasn't the greatest landlord. And we also lived in a 1-bedroom, so we kind of needed to like move anyways because we were having a baby, but I wasn't really wanting to move because I was like super pregnant and I felt like I could go into labor any day. But we ended up finding the place where we're at now, and it's a trailer, but we don't have neighbors. It's in a really good location and it's a 2-bedroom, so I love it so much better here. I'm so glad. But that's just like when I was like 35, 36 weeks pregnant, we were moving, and that was really difficult because I was on bed rest. So I really couldn't help very much. I helped pack a little bit, but I couldn't like carry anything. So that was difficult. And then I ended up getting induced at 39 weeks. So I went into the hospital at 6 a.m. and I just remember being so terrified, so overwhelmed. I was just scared, like I've never had a baby before. I had no idea what to expect. I was really terrified and I was so overwhelmed. I almost had a panic attack because I just remember laying in the bed and them hooking up IVs and just like asking me a million questions and having me fill out paperwork, and it was just so overwhelming. I was like on this bed, they had it like really like, it was like rose up really high, and there was like 5 nurses all around me, and it was so overwhelming. I feel like they shouldn't do it like that, because it almost sent me into a panic attack. I just remember looking at my mom like, oh my god, like this is really happening, like what is going on? Like it was really terrifying. And so they hooked up the induction medicine, what is it called, Pitocin or something. They started that, and I wasn't really feeling much for a few hours. I don't remember like the exact details of everything. I did get an epidural when I was like 7 centimeters dilated, I think. And around like 4 or 5 centimeters dilated, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but I just remember a little bit before I had my epidural, I was having really bad contractions. They weren't the worst thing because, you know, contractions come and go. Like, when I was about 37 weeks pregnant, I had back labor pains, just like your body getting you ready for labor, and those were more painful than like the normal real contractions at the hospital when I was like in active labor. Like, that was so much worse because they didn't come and go. It was just like a constant back pain, and that was one of the worst pains of my life. So I was having bad contractions. They weren't in my back like how I had experienced before going into labor. They were like period cramps, but like majorly intensified. But they came and they went, so it wasn't like unbearable. But I just, like, from the get-go, I was like, I want the epidural. Like, I just want the epidural because there's a gnat. I have a banana here. That's probably why there's a gnat. But yeah, I just knew I wanted the epidural. Even if the pain wasn't that bad, I knew that there was still more to come, so I wanted the epidural just in case, because I know once you get to a certain point, you can't get the epidural, and I was terrified of that happening. So as soon as they could give me the epidural, I was like, I'll take it. So the epidural, and I can't stand it when some women talk about their birth story or like getting an epidural or like pushing or whatever it is, and they're like, oh, it's not even that bad, like, people are just dramatic, like, it's not even bad. Like, listen, everybody's story is completely different. Like, how it affects you doesn't mean how it affects someone else. Like, I've had some women say that they didn't even feel the epidural and it wasn't even bad. For me, the epidural was awful. It was completely fucking hell. I can't even, like, look at pictures of, like, because sometimes, you know, on Facebook it'll have, like, a picture of a woman getting an epidural and it'll, like, say some kind of quote. I can't even look at that shit. It makes my back hurt. Like, I feel like I have, like, slight PTSD from the whole thing. It took, like, 30 minutes for this epidural, and I didn't think that I was going to be able to get it because they were having a lot of trouble for some reason, and it was so painful. Like, I almost just said, like, fuck it, like, I can't do this because it was so painful. It was awful. I don't understand how some women say that they don't feel it. Like what? Like, I wish that were the case for me, but I can't stand it whenever they try to, like, act like how they felt is how everyone else feels. Like, no, labor is completely different for every woman. Like, it's not the same. But so I got the epidural. They finally got it done. I was crying. It hurt so bad, but it was definitely worth it. Like, if I end up getting pregnant again, like, I will get the epidural again, but I'm probably gonna have a fucking panic attack because going into it, I didn't think that the epidural was gonna be that bad. You don't really hear people talk about it being terrible. I thought it was just gonna be like getting an IV or something. Like, I didn't expect it to take that long. I don't think it's supposed to take that long. I don't know if it was just the lady that I had or like if it was just my body or what, but it was awful. It was terrible. So I'm not saying it's like that for everybody. That's why I can't stand when some people like just like act like you're being dramatic. Like, it's different for everybody. Like, don't sit here and tell me that like I'm not telling the truth, like I'm not being dramatic. Like, it's 5 months later. My baby is 5 months. And I'm still telling you that it was fucking hell and it was awful. And it was one of the worst parts of my entire labor. But it was worth it. It did work. I couldn't feel my contractions anymore. But the epidural was like, the pain of the epidural was worse than the pain of my contractions. But it was just like a one-time kind of pain. The contractions would have like, so I mean, it was worth getting, but it wasn't easy. So I had my epidural, and it completely numbed me. It did what it was supposed to do, and I was able to actually take a nap so I could like rest up for pushing. And I also remember having like the shakes, I remember like shivering, and I remember this one nurse asking me if I was cold, and I was like, I'm not cold, but I can't quit shaking. I don't know what's wrong, but I guess that's normal, because one of the other nurses who was like an older nurse was like, no, that's just like adrenaline or something. So I remember having the shakes, which was kind of weird. And you're also not allowed to eat during labor, and I remember going into it thinking like that was gonna be like my major issue, is not being able to eat, but I really wasn't even hungry. It's just like there's so much adrenaline, there's so much going on, you're so exhausted, and you're just so like overwhelmed. That's like the last thing you're thinking about, at least for me. I wasn't even hungry after I had my baby. But anyways, so I had my epidural. Made it to where I was able to take a nap. I took a nap, and when I woke up and they checked me, I was 10 centimeters dilated, so it was time to push. And that part was really hard too. I remember talking to some women before I went into labor, and them telling me that the pushing was like the easiest part. Once you get past your contractions and the epidural and you push, it's like easy to go from there. And once again, that wasn't the case for me, because everybody is different. I don't know if it was because it was my first baby or what, but that part was hell too. And you know how on Facebook sometimes there'll be like a thing you can share, and it's like, oh, like women answer these questions, like how long were you in labor, how long did you push, did you have the epidural, yada yada. This, like, when that was like going around a little while ago, and I saw that so many women were like most women are in labor for about 10 to like 18 hours, like somewhere in between there. I was in labor for about 12 hours. I went in at 6 a.m. I had him around 6 p.m. So about 12 hours. So that's normal. But everyone was saying that they pushed for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It was like a minute. It was like less than an hour. Everyone was saying that they pushed for. Well, I pushed for like 3 hours. And I was giving it my all. Like, I was really trying, and it took 3 hours to get him out. It was hell. And I remember at one point he wasn't, and I did have the epidural, so, but it was still like painful. Like there was so much pressure and it still hurt. So I couldn't imagine if I didn't have the epidural. I couldn't imagine. But anyways, like I was saying, at one point I remember my doctor saying that he wasn't positioned correctly or something. Like his head wasn't where it was supposed to be. So they had to take this, I think it's called like an egg ball or something. It's this giant, it's not an exercise ball. It's like, it's shaped differently, but it's like a big ball thing. And I had to put it in between my legs and like roll on my side. And that, I remember having to stay in that position for a while. And that was so painful. There was so much pressure, just like the pressure. Oh, it was so awful. And then he finally was positioned where he was supposed to be. So I started pushing again. And then my baby has a big head. I think that's why. And it was my first baby. But I think that's why, like, it took so long. It literally took 3 hours. I think maybe even a little bit longer, to be honest. Like, I think it was, like, in between 3 and 4 hours that I pushed. Like, I was so exhausted towards the end. I was like, I can't. Like, I didn't say that, but in my head, I was like, I can't do this. Like, how am I going to do this? He's not coming out. And then, towards the end, I remember the doctor saying that, like, his heart rate was dropping, and I didn't know this at the time, but I guess the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. And when she told me his heart rate was dropping, I panicked, and I fucking pushed like a mad woman, and then he finally came out, and it was the most, I don't know, when your baby comes out, it's like a crazy feeling. It's just like so many emotions. And the pain is gone, and like you have your baby, and it's just like, it's really emotional. Everybody was crying. He weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces. He had a terrible cone head because he has a big head, and he was in my birth canal for a long time because I was pushing for so long, and his head was so coned, it looked funny. But, and I remember before I had my baby, I would watch a lot of like birth videos, and a lot of women said that, like, you know, because after you have your baby, you also have to like birth the placenta. But for me, it just came right out. I didn't have to like do any more like extra pushing or anything. It just came right out, so it wasn't like an issue for me. Like it wasn't painful. And then they also would talk about how the nurses have to come and like push on your stomach to make sure all the blood and like the stuff is coming out. And I know a lot of women said that was like so painful, but I don't even hardly remember. I know the nurses did do that, but like I had my baby on my chest and I was just like going through like so many emotions and stuff. That wasn't painful like at all. But that just goes to show that everybody's experience is different. And I watched these one YouTubers that just had a baby. I'm not gonna say who they are, but they just had a baby, and they were like, yeah, labor wasn't even that bad. Everybody is just dramatic about it. Like, that's what I've learned about people, is that they like over exaggerate, and it's just like, no, like everybody's story is different. Like no two labors are the same, you know. Like you can't sit here and like speak for somebody else about their fucking labor, like especially if you're a man and it was a man that was saying this. But yeah, that's basically it. It was the best day of my life, but it was also, it's a blur kind of, like it's hard to remember all the little details. And I know a lot of women are like so excited for like their first meal after having a baby, but I remember I didn't have an appetite for like the first 2 or 3 weeks after having my baby. Like I dropped a lot of weight for like the first 2 or 3 weeks after having him because I didn't have an appetite. I remember my first meal I had, like I did want food, but like, Mario, my cats are getting in the cabinet, look. They're so mischievous, I swear. But the first meal that I had after having my baby was Arby's. I had a beef and cheddar with some curly fries and a pop, but I didn't even eat like half of it. I just didn't really have an appetite. And even like the first couple of weeks after having him, I barely ate. But I was also like super depressed after I had him. I guess it's called, I looked it up, and it's called like the baby blues, because your hormones are all leveling back out and everything. But I was so depressed. I was also breastfeeding for the first couple of weeks of his life, and that was really hard and overwhelming. I couldn't leave the house because he was constantly wanting to feed, because I wasn't producing enough milk. And I didn't know that, but he had lost like a pound when we took him to his checkup, so that's why we switched to formula. I wanted to breastfeed, I know it's better for them, but all that matters is that your baby is fed. So we switched to formula, and honestly, the only thing that I don't like about the formula is obviously the cost. It's not cheap, and his poop isn't very good. Like his poop is really hard, and my doctor said that that's just like how it's gonna be with formula. But I feel like for my next baby, I want to like really try to breastfeed because of the poop situation. Like I just don't want my baby to have to go through, because my baby really has to try really hard to poop, and he'll cry because it hurts him, and it's so sad. And he's on like a laxative right now, and it's still really not like loosening up his poop very much. It's making him poop a little bit more, but it's still like hard, and I just feel so bad for him. We've tried juice. I'm giving him baby food now, and I tried giving him prunes and everything, and nothing really seems to help. Every once in a while he'll have diarrhea, but like on a regular basis his poop is like really hard. But yeah, I'm just kind of rambling on at this point. But that's basically the end of my birth story. I feel like I probably left some stuff out, but I don't really remember. And I don't really do any editing because I'm just starting out this whole YouTube thing, and I just don't have a lot of time to be editing. It would be different if I got paid like most YouTubers, but I don't. So I'm not gonna put that much time into it. But I'm gonna go. I think my cats are wanting food because their food is in that cabinet. So I'm gonna go, but thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.